Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Knowledge as We See It. I'm your host, Daniel Nathan, and today we have a real treat in store for our listeners. We often find ourselves pondering, right, over the concept of engagement and how it shapes our experiences within the workplace. So today, we have the privilege of delving into this subject with an exceptional guest, someone who has really made a significant impact in the world of instructional design and professional development. Joining us on this episode is none other than Devlin Peck, an acclaimed instructional design coach and recognized LinkedIn top voice. Devlin has been a guiding force, helping countless instructional designers elevate their skills and secure rewarding opportunities for themselves in the industry. Throughout this episode, we'll be exploring the secrets behind Devlin's success, learning from his wealth of experience and uncovering the strategies that have led to remarkable transformation in the world of training and education. So whether you're an aspiring instructional designer, maybe seeking to upskill yourselves, or someone just simply passionate about the art of effective training, this conversation is for you. It's going to be packed with valuable insights that should really resonate with you. So fasten your seatbelts as we embark on a journey to discover how to train yourself to train better with the brilliant Devlin Peck. Let's get started. Hello, Devlin. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Dan. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me on the show.
Brilliant. It's a pleasure to have you. We're super excited that you could join us. Before we get started and we jump into the conversations, it'd be great to sort of understand a little bit about you, your background, where you're from, and how you got to the position you're in today.
Sure. I'm from Tampa, Florida. So I spent most of my life in Florida so far. I went to Florida State. I was studying English literature. I was wavering between that and English education because I was really passionate about education and English lit. So I wanted to teach. I was volunteering to tutor at local high schools. I was taking all of the student teaching opportunities I could get my hands on. But as I was getting closer to graduating, and I was exploring my options, like, teach at a high school or pursue a PhD and roll the dice at maybe getting a tenure track professor position, it wasn't looking too promising with just the opportunities, like the low pay, not very good work-life balance, and just being tied down to one place. I really wanted to be able to travel and earn a good living and do those things. So I kind of happened upon instructional design. I was applying for a part-time journalism job. And then they interviewed me and they're like, yeah, we don't need you on the journalism team, but we want you on the training team. So I started that my senior year of college. I started researching it more once I started working in the role. And I found out about this instructional design career. And my university, Florida State, had a really good master's program for it. So I kind of dove in. I saw it had a good work-life balance. I saw it had a good earning potential. And I was like, I feel like I could freelance doing this, working from my laptop while traveling Europe. It combines technology, education, writing, which I was passionate about. I was like, I'm on board. Let's go for it. So I started my master's program 2 weeks after graduating undergrad and started my freelance business that same semester and went from there.
Tell me again, what did you master in?
Instructional systems and learning technologies. Interesting.
Can you expand a little bit on that? What does that mean?
It's kind of, put simply, it's like instructional design. So it's a pretty old program, but instructional systems. So it's like, how can you build systems to help people learn? So what are the inputs? What are the outputs? Where does the feedback come into play? That sort of thing. So you're studying a lot of different instructional design models, instructional design theory and science. And then there's the learning technologies piece. So then there's some more tech and development focused classes as well. But it's essentially training people to be instructional designers.
Amazing. So not only do you bring, I suppose, to this podcast that your technical experience, you also have the academic credentials to back that up as well. So that's wonderful to hear. What's the sort of, if I asked you for the one single best piece of career advice you'd ever been given, what would you say that is?
Probably Probably the one that helped me the most is when I was starting as a freelancer. I got my first like big contract where I'm like, okay, this is like serious money we're talking about. And this was to me as like a 22-year-old, you know, it wasn't like a ton, but I was like,
But for a 22-year-old, it probably is.
yeah, it was. And I was like, okay, this is like a serious project. I could like sustain myself if I don't mess this up essentially. But I had to figure out how much to charge. I knew there was a budget, but I had to name my price. And I was torn up about it for a while, and I was talking to my professor, and I'm like, yeah, I'm just so afraid of coming in and giving a price that's too low. And then the professor is like, well, what kind of message, or no, giving a price that's too high. That's what I was afraid of. And he was like, well, what kind of message is it going to send if you give a price that's like really low? Like you don't want to undersell yourself or have those kind of judgments either. So that really helped me. That was very early advice I got starting my freelance business. And then it really helped me like value myself and my time and what I bring to the table, and kind of not be afraid to name my price.
Awesome. And for that first opportunity, did you price it correctly? Were you happy with the outcome there?
Yeah, I would say so. I priced it right at the top of the person's budget, and we got it done on budget, on time. It was a success. Yeah,
brilliant. And the rest is history. Oh, fascinating. Yeah. And then before we get into the main discussion, could you sort of maybe just tell us something about yourself, perhaps that not many other people know?
I'm a big gamer. I don't really ever talk about that in like a public setting, but yeah, I grew up playing like the RPG games, like the MMORPGs like RuneScape, World of Warcraft. I played like some League of Legends. So there are seasons I go through where I'll spend a lot of my time gaming like for 3 months, and then it'll be like a 3-month work sprint, and I'm like, oh no time for games. But so I like vacillate between the two. But yeah, that's one of my top hobbies for sure.
I've always felt as well, like, you know, gaming also sort of keeps the mind sharp as well, right? So in between projects, it keeps you fresh, it keeps you engaged, essentially. It keeps the mind ticking over.
Yeah, and it's good for like learning nerds. Like I love starting a new game because it's like, okay, I need to like research everything there is to know about this and like learn all the mechanics, learn all the stuff I need to know. Yeah, it's like a little simulated real life environment, so it's fun for people who are passionate about like learning and trying trial and error and that type of thing.
Brilliant. So, Devlin, I've got a question for you. As an instructional design coach yourself, I'm sure you've helped countless professionals upskill and excel in their training roles. Could you perhaps maybe share your philosophy, perhaps, when it comes to training people to train better? What sort of principles help guide your approach there?
Yeah, that's a good question. And just to connect the dots, so I freelanced for a couple of years, but then I started creating content to help other instructional designers like build their skills, build their businesses, land new opportunities in the field. So that's how my business kind of transitioned to freelance client work to now helping people find success in the field. And I love that. So how I first started thinking about myself is like, wow, now I'm doing instructional design work for other instructional designers. So it's kind of a fun or unique position to be in. But yeah, the philosophies to help instructional designers do better instructional design work. I think one of the core principles is like talk to the people that you're serving. It's amazing how easily that can get overlooked in the corporate instructional design space. If we're talking to the stakeholders say we need this, and then we're building it out without ever actually bringing in the person who's going to take the training into the discussion or into the conversation. So surveys, focus groups, one-on-one interviews can help a lot. Save you a lot of time and also help you make the experience more effective. I also really don't, really like advocating against like the boring corporate training that a lot of instructional designers might be familiar with or might be working against as well. So one kind of philosophy or approach I share with people is to add moments of delight to your learning experiences. So kind of like Apple's philosophy, like surprise and delight. It's kind of like that. It's like little surprises that people wouldn't expect to be in a learning experience, whether it's like a fun piece of dialogue or like a unique interaction, other than like a typical multiple choice question. I have tons of examples on my YouTube channel and stuff like that, or like that. Yeah, just little moments that make people feel like, entertained or surprised by the attention to detail or thoughtfulness or creativity. That can go a long way, I'd say, in this more stale corporate e-learning environment.
Yeah. That's some really interesting points you made there. Can you tell me though, actually, if we step back a little bit, how did you make the jump from being an instructional designer to an instructional design coach? Can you talk me a little bit about that journey?
Yeah, so I think it really comes down to the content I was creating. So, because I guess when I was doing some of that client work, I didn't feel as fulfilled. I was stuck in some positions, certain projects where we didn't have access to that learner. And even though I was like pushing for it, kind of doors were getting closed in my face. It's like, just do the work, build the course. We're going to put it out there.
Right.
So I wasn't feeling super fulfilled with that, especially being so passionate about education and helping people and wanting to make a difference in their lives. So I'm like, why don't I just start creating tutorials about stuff that I'm struggling with on the job that I know other instructional designers are probably struggling with? So it started off really technical, like how to do certain things with XAPI or JavaScript or just like technical software pieces. But then a lot of my friends, so those got some traction and it was rewarding, people saying, hey, this really worked for me. So I really liked creating that content. But at the same time, I had a lot of friends who were like graduating college and not sure what to do with their lives, or who were teaching and were like, man, this is terrible. Like, I'm overworked and underpaid. I want to do something else. And I'm like, you should check out this instructional design field. Like, not a lot of people know about it. There's a lot of opportunity over here. And like, I can't believe how it's going for me. It's going better than I could have imagined. So check it out over here. Like, a lot of opportunity. And so I started walking them through how to become an instructional designer step by step. I'm like, learn this theory, create portfolio projects like this, use this software. And like, I would get on calls with them and kind of guide them, teach them how to become an instructional designer, essentially condensing what I learned in my master's programs and in my client work so far. And after a certain point, after like doing that 5 or 6 times, I was like, I'm repeating myself a lot. I could save a lot of time if I just put this together into one big article on my website, which is where I was posting all my other tutorials. So I put together this big guide, how to become an instructional designer, and that kind of blew up on Google and started ranking really well. And then during COVID, a lot of teachers were trying to become instructional designers. So it was a huge influx onto that article and reaching out to me for help. So I kind of started building a business around that, and I built a boot camp to help people without ID skills kind of build up their skills, build their portfolio, navigate the interview process, and then make an impact on the job. And it's been very, very rewarding for me being able to do that.
I get that regarding how rewarding it is. I meet a lot of people in my walk of life, and people who I tend to resonate really well with is people such as yourself, where as you say, you were in the instructional design field, but you felt unfulfilled. So the next, natural or unnatural step for you was to essentially train others, right? To be there to train others, to pass on your expertise, to pass on your knowledge, your insights to others, to essentially empower them to become better in their roles. And I was speaking before in the intro about you essentially putting others in a situation where they can better themselves, find more opportunities. You spoke a few moments ago about there's a huge sector, huge world of opportunity for new instructional design coaches. You speak quite frequently in your website about the service you provide in upskilling current instructional design coaches. So on that point of upskilling, what's the ideal frequency, would you say, for instructional designers to really invest in their upskilling and continuing their professional development? How important is it for instructional designers to stay ahead of the curve with regards to their skills?
I mean, I think it's one of the most important things you can be doing as an instructional designer. I think and most instructional designers I know are constantly upskilling. Like a profession like this, I feel like it draws so many lifelong learners and people who are passionate about learning and education that it makes a lot of sense. It's like if you're going to be, educating people and helping them do better on their jobs, the onus is kind of on you to also be doing that for yourself and your own career. It's kind of like, if you're going to a doctor who doesn't take care of their own health, or you're going to like a couples counselor whose relationship like is in shambles, it's like you want to lead by example. You want to show that you are the lifelong learner, that you are learning to get better at your craft, because that's exactly what you're helping your audience do.
That's very true. I like those analogies.
I would say most instructional designers I see do a really good job at that.
It's fascinating. I really like that. Really like that take you have there. In terms of sort of expanding knowledge, is there a value for instructional designers in expanding sort of their knowledge beyond the kind of traditional instructional design domains?
Absolutely. I mean, instructional design is like so interdisciplinary. So that's something that struck me pretty early about this field. I was like, there's opportunity where if there is one particular thing that you are more passionate about, for example, if it's computer programming or, visual motion graphics or animation, like if you have the core ID skill set and then you specialize in something like that, it makes you such a valuable asset to the right team. So that's kind of how I was able to find a lot of success in my freelance business. I learned the instructional design foundations. I learned to articulate storyline. And then I was like, I'm really liking this JavaScript stuff and this advanced development stuff where I just kind of zone out for hours and focus on solving this tough development problem and kind of integrating that into common tasks that instructional designers need to solve. And I got some of my most profitable client projects doing that, where they needed someone who had that coding knowledge, that JavaScript knowledge, and then combined it with like the traditional ID skill set. And I imagine the same thing would be true no matter what you're specializing in, whether it's you're getting really good at storytelling or, again, really good at making animated videos, for example. It's like there will always be those more specialized opportunities because the field is so interdisciplinary, and it pays off very well when you do specialize in something you're passionate about. I guess to elaborate on that a little bit further, like it doesn't only pay off in like your own like professional success, but also in the impact you're making in your audience. Like those things will definitely surprise and delight people if you have a skill set you're bringing to the field that not everyone else has. You can really ramp up the learning experiences and make them more engaging and effective.
That's brilliant, and it speaks again to the fact that how transferable the skills of an instructional designer are to many different domains, many different disciplines, that require the skills of instructional design. Can you give us maybe a few other sort of practical examples of how cross-disciplinary skills can really enhance the sort of instructional design practice?
Yeah, so like user experience design skills, I think, are really valuable. User experience or user interface design skills like that. If you're really good at UI and UX design, you could probably make such an impactful like e-learning experience, for example. Motion graphics, storytelling. When I have this conversation with people, I think it's like almost more challenging to think of something that doesn't have any overlap with instructional design, or like that wouldn't make you a more impactful instructional designer. Writing skills, that's such a key part of the process, especially like research skills, like UX design, but skills that help you with talking to people and getting data from people and their performance. So even like data analytics skill sets or specializations, I think that would go really far with making sense of learning data and improving learning programs accordingly.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure I could just keep rattling things off. Communication skills, so valuable working with stakeholders.
Amazing. So again, it speaks to the plethora of opportunities and direction, as someone can take your career as an instructional designer. As you say, there's so many sort of cross-disciplinary skills that you possess as an instructional designer or as an instructional design coach. It's really fascinating to hear. In terms of, let's say, the wider community of instructional designers, like, is there a way for instructional designers to sort of engage in like peer-to-peer learning, knowledge sharing? Does that kind of community exist within the US, for example, within your part of the world?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was one of the first things that struck me about this field, is just like how helpful and supportive the instructional design community is as a whole. I think LinkedIn is like the top place that I've engaged with instructional designers when I was getting into the field. Networking via like direct messages, but also just seeing the conversations that people are having. I know there are private communities on like every social media platform for instructional designers. Like I know there are Facebook communities. I have a community for people who follow my content where we talk about the content and ask questions and share responses. So yeah, there are so many different instructional design communities. I think, again, LinkedIn is like a good starting place, but then there are so many different groups and places to kind of branch out from there. But yeah, generally IDs are very supportive. People who I would ask questions to or have informational interviews with, they are instrumental in helping me get my business off the ground, learn the tools of the trade. But yeah, great community out there. If you just got to kind of get out there and reach out and put yourself out there.
Yeah, make good
But the field is very
Yeah.
supportive.
Ask for support, and that's brilliant. And like, so what's your experience been like, would you say, with peer learning, with this community outreach? How has it had any impact on you professionally?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I don't think I would have been able to do any of this without support from people in the community. Like Kath Ellis, for example, had a huge impact on me. She was like this e-learning designer and developer that I looked up to like immensely and would be following her for years, and then eventually just reached out and shot my shot, and she's like, let's hop on a call. And then we wound up meeting like every week. So yeah, getting on those calls and kind of just sharing what we're both working on. Yeah, showing both behind the scenes of our own businesses. And then it would be super inspiring. So like I would learn about some new tools from her, combine that with what I was already thinking, and then I'm like, oh, I want to build this thing in part because like, oh yeah, Kath will think it's cool. Let me show this off to Kath. Like it's kind of like a friendly thing almost, but it's like you're doing it for the field and for your own portfolio. So yeah, a lot of times work didn't even feel like work because of the community around me, and because it's like exciting in a sense. And it's nice because yeah, the network you build, people might have different skill sets or different things that they're bringing to the table, different experience. So it's like if you're helping each other in different ways, it can be really beneficial for both of you. You get to do some teaching, you get to do some learning, and you get to do some just hanging out and talking about life together. So yeah, I've had a lot of relationships like that. So I guess my suggestion there is like shoot your shot, see if people are open to hopping on a call, check in with people. Like I wouldn't reach out to 100 people and say, hey, can you mentor me? But the people who you are following, who you are staying up to date with, like it never hurts to kind of to ask.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's also with these like communities that, and you may feel, especially as an up and coming instructional designer, right? You may feel, this is going to sound like a stupid question, but there's always someone else who's had that same question before, right? Someone else who's always wondered the same thing that you're wondering. And the power, I believe, of like online communities, support networks, whatever it might be, really is invaluable. And you, of course, as a trainer of instructional designers as well, I can totally understand how you would leverage those communities for yourself. I'd like to switch the conversation a little bit more to sort of the practical elements, putting instructional design into practice. If we can talk a little bit maybe about strategies and techniques that instructional designers themselves can use to create engaging learning experiences. What kind of strategies and techniques would you suggest?
I think one of the easiest ones to start implementing or to kind of conceptualize is like incorporating good practice and feedback opportunities. I think that's an easy way to get away from like the information dump learning experience. It's like, how are we putting a lot of emphasis on like, how are we letting our learners practice with these knowledge and skills that we want them to learn, or how are we letting them practice these behaviors in this training environment so that they can use them on the job. So thinking more about like role-playing exercises or scenario-based learning, which is one of my favorites. Even simple, it could even be scenario-based multiple choice questions. That might be a little bit more aligned with what people are going to face on the job versus these more traditional like knowledge check questions, which again can be practiced if that's the goal. Like we need people to literally memorize this stuff. But so practice and feedback I think is a good strategy or principle to use. Using a conversational tone, I guess it's like a tactic, but I think that's like where people miss the mark a lot. Like, yeah, don't try to sound academic or overly formal. Talk to people like they're people, whether it's with your narrator voice that's typed on the instructions or it's an animated video script. I think conversational tone goes a long way and can help a lot with engagement. Do some form of analysis. I think that's overlooked a lot. So even if you only do have access to one stakeholder, just kind of getting into it with them, asking why we're even doing this and trying to get to the root of what problem you're trying to solve with this learning solution, because learning solutions, of course, don't solve every type of problem. And there is some onus on the instructional designer to do some diagnosis before prescribing that solution.
Yeah, well, definitely. You spoke a few minutes ago. You spoke, one of the tips that you were sharing and you mentioned of is a moment of delight, adding in a moment of delight into the sort of training program, the training course that one might be creating. Could you expand a little bit on that, what you meant by moments of delight?
Yeah, I think that's a good one. I don't have like a formal definition for it, I don't think. But yeah, just these moments where, yeah, people will be surprised. People will be like, oh, this was a nice touch. This was a nice attention to detail. So for example, if we're doing a scenario-based course, it's a question for instructional designers, and it's scenario-based. So it's like you're a new instructional designer, and a stakeholder just came to you and asked you for an e-learning course on how to communicate, right? So then it's like, what do you do? It's like build the course or ask a follow-up question. Overly simplified. If you choose like the build the course option, a moment of delight might be like a little video-based cutscene where it shows you like typing away on the computer and then rolling out the course to all of these people, and the people are just kind of like putting their face in their hands and like falling asleep, and then the person who asked for it is like, this isn't working at all, why are they so bored, or something like that. So like that's a moment of delight compared to text-based feedback where it's like, oh yeah, the course didn't work because you didn't do any analysis, like try again. Simple example. Another one is maybe oh yeah, here's an example from one of the students I'm working with. It's like an e-learning course on for teachers on how to like keep the school secure. And so instead of like a multiple choice question like, oh yeah, what can we do to keep the school secure, check all that apply, it's like we're looking at a visual of the school, and it's like select what's off, for example. So using like visual questions instead of text-based questions. Moments of like learner freedom, I think, are a really good way to add moments of delight. So letting the user like make a choice, and then even if it's an inconsequential choice, for example, or letting them take an action. Like there's another lab project where someone like spilled a chemical. And then instead of it just being like, okay, yeah, try again, you cleaned it up now, it's like, let's clean this up. And you like drag the broom over it to clean it up. So just little moments like that, like interactivity, freedom, user choice, animation. I think those are all just some examples of things you can do where it's like, oh, this is a little different than, like, this is catching my attention. It's making me laugh. It's making me smile. It's making me like kind of lean into the experience versus just spam click a next button and try to get through it.
Visuals work. They really do. And as you say, you know, often engagement in training can be a real challenging prospect. So using, you know, you spoke about fun little sort of videos in your training and odd little sort of scenarios to try and sort of perk up those engagement levels. Really, really can work great, especially with training materials. So yeah, I really think that's a good idea. In terms of like challenges, right? Challenges that people face. From your experience, what are the typical challenges that instructional designers face when creating or delivering training programs? Is it just engagement? Tell me a little bit about that.
I'm sure we could do a whole hour on this, but some that come to mind, I mean, on theme is, one challenge is getting access to the audience you're serving, or like not being able to do thorough analysis, for example, not having all the data you need before going ahead and actually building out a like solution in quotes. So that's a challenge. Not having the time or budget or space to conduct thorough analysis.
Could you, sorry to interrupt you, would you mind expanding a little bit about that? Because you've spoken a few moments ago, also about doing your analysis ahead of sort of creating and delivering this training session. Why is that so important, doing analysis of the audience, of the employees that you're going to be training?
Yeah, good question. I think that's so important because I think there are a lot of cases where stakeholders or executives or leadership will see a problem and they'll say, hey, we need a course or we need a class to resolve this problem, right? This problem is because people don't know what they need to know. And it's just like a hunch from someone. And then it comes down to the instructional designer or the learning team. And it's like, okay, build this course. We need this thing. So it's kind of tough, especially for newer instructional designers, to like push back on that or question it or anything. It's just like, this is what this is what we need. This is what I'm going to make. The problem with that is the problem might not be because people don't know what they need to know. The problem might be because people don't have the tools that they need, or they might be getting punished for doing what they're supposed to do. So they're doing this other thing, even though they know what they're supposed to do. They're like, I'm not going to do that because it's not going to go well for me. The list could go on. they might not have the background skills or knowledge required to even like learn what it is you want them to learn, to do what it is you need them to do. So analysis helps a lot there. It's like, what is even going on here? Is learning even going to help solve this problem? That's like the first step of the analysis. Because if the answer is no, then you can spend months or years or hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars designing some fancy, beautiful learning solutions. But if it's not actually solving the problem, it's not going to make an impact for the organization. It's kind of just like wasting a whole lot of time and money. So I think there's a lot of like, yeah, just a lot of wasted energy if we're skipping analysis. And I think it's one of the biggest things that instructional design as a field like overlooks today. The other being like evaluation. It's like, okay, we did this thing. We don't know if it worked because we're not evaluating it, but like, let's build another course. So I just think it's a very important part of the instructional design puzzle. We can build the most beautiful learning solutions, but if they're not actually solving a problem, how is it adding value to the business as a whole?
Has that been a problem for you personally in your professional experience of when you've not been able to get access to the right people to carry out the right analysis?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is part of why I was getting frustrated with the freelance work that I was doing. I was talking to a lot of project managers who they're the ones looking for me, the freelancer, and they've already heard from their higher ups, we need a course for this. So it's kind of hard to come in and be like, hey, let's get your boss's boss on the phone and rethink this. I wasn't really in a position to do that. It was kind of the people who I've heard have the most success with that, and what I think would be a good way to handle that is to kind of build that trust over time and take baby steps towards making an impact with the solutions you're designing. But as a freelancer, you're coming in for a project and then you're taking on the next client. There's not a whole lot of space for that. And then sometimes I would get excited, like as I built my credibility and built my business and my portfolio and all of that, I was starting to talk to people higher up on the chain, so to speak, like chief learning officers and executives. And I would be so excited. I'm like, okay, they are going to care about performance. We're going to be able to do this like right. And then on the call, it's like, yeah, here's how many courses we're building a week. We need some extra help with this. We need to build these courses. So I'm just like, we try kind of probing and seeing how resistant they would be to kind of more performance oriented conversations. And it would be really frustrating and disheartening. And that's part of why I love so much what I'm doing now, because the people I'm serving are the instructional designers. Yeah. I can impact them directly instead of, trying to impact them like slowly through people who might be blocking that impact. It's like I can do my own analysis of the audience I'm serving. So I know that's a big tricky thing to navigate, whether you're a full-time employee or a consultant or freelancer, but I think it is one of the most important things we can do to make a bigger impact as a field.
That's interesting. I mean, the world of instructional design sounds like a fascinating, career opportunity for someone to step into. If I came to you, Devlin, and said, I'm thinking of being an instructional designer, what qualities, what abilities and skills, maybe even before technical skills, but what sort of personality traits and qualities do I need to be able to become a successful instructional designer?
I would probably ask how you feel about learning new things and how you feel about helping other people learn new things. I think that if you got those two pieces down, you're probably most of the way there. If you're passionate about learning and helping people learn, that's, pretty much every successful instructional designer I've spoken to or worked with, like they've got those pieces covered. Those are the big ones. A disqualifying question would be like, how important is it to you to kind of like be in front of the audience that you're teaching and kind of be there yourself to witness those like aha moments? I know a lot of teachers, that's really important to them, but you don't get that as much as an instructional designer because you are working more behind the scenes. You're designing the materials that you'll hand off to a facilitator in most cases, or designing a self-paced learning experience that's going to go out to tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of people, but you'll just be in your office working on the next one while that's going on, potentially.
Okay.
But yeah, passionate about learning, passionate about helping people learn. Good communication, I think, is really important, written and verbal, of course. So, but you don't necessarily need to be like an over-the-top people person. Like there are a lot of instructional designers who work independently. There are some who work every day with a big team. So I think there's a lot of, no hard requirements there.
And how rewarding can it be as an instructional designer?
I think part of what's rewarding about being an instructional designer is you do have a very far reach. That's part of what drew me to it more than teaching, because a training program can go out to millions of people instead of relying on the 30 students you have in your classroom at a time. So that's an exciting part about instructional design. When you do get it right, it can go really, really right. And you can be working on some really important projects. Like some projects I've worked on, it's helping people avoid deadly accidents on the job. So in some cases, you might literally be saving people's lives if you're helping these employees make the right decisions, helping the employees preserve their health. In some cases, avoiding like long-term lung damage and in certain projects. So there are definitely some rewarding projects. I've talked to instructional designers working in nonprofits, for example, and like they really, really passionate about their mission and what it is that they're doing. So I don't think it's like, as a field, no one's doing rewarding work. That's definitely not the picture, but there are certain places you can get stuck where it might feel like you're not making as big of an impact as you could be making.
Brilliant. So Devlin, I want to extend my sincere gratitude for joining us on today's episode of the podcast. I think your wealth of experience and your sort of profound expertise in the field of instructional design have really provided some valuable and practical tips and insights that will undoubtedly resonate with the audience. So I really greatly appreciate your time and the wisdom that you've shared with us today. And then to our listeners, please be sure to connect with Devlin on LinkedIn and check out his website, devlinpeck.com. Stay updated on all his latest endeavors and continue the conversation there with him if you wish to. So Devlin, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure having you on.
Great. I appreciate it, Dan. Always happy to talk about instructional design, and I will see all of our listeners soon on LinkedIn or my website.
It sounds good. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We look forward to bringing you more engaging content in the future on the Knowledge as We See It podcast. Until then, stay inspired and keep learning. Thank you.